So you're going to see that there was an elevated density of swine at this place. This can give us an overview of the impacts regarding the movements and the management of permits and surveillance in such a zone. So Mrs. Dr. Caroline Meunier, she graduated from the Faculty of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Montreal, and she practiced in the small animal sector for nearly 10 years before joining the Canadian Food Agency. And she held various positions of the CFIA before becoming a national veterinary specialist in animal health operations. In the operational orientation and expertise team, terrestrial animal disease control and traceability. So without further ado, we will welcome Dr. Meunier. Yes, hello, you can hear me well. So, hello, I'm going to talk about zoning and permits. We're going to see two components. We're going to start with zoning. During an ASF outbreak. And so with the interventions that we saw within the framework of the CFIA, we have basic principles that we have to use in order to eradicate the agents, to prevent a contact between susceptible animals and the disease agency, contain the disease agent to a geographic area. So this is called zoning, and then stabilize the market access until disease-free status is regained. And we saw it earlier, the first objective is really to contain the disease to a specific geographical zone, depending on the number of zones that we have. And as a secondary benefit, we will be able to manage directly by defining where there's a disease, by extension, where there's no disease. So all the zones around our control zone. In Canada, we call them primary control zones, and so in other countries it can be called differently. So we have to know that the primary control zone, we're going to define it, and we'll see how it is. And so as you can see here, the first what a zone can look like, and just before what we have, all the farms that you see, the impact that they receive to be part of a control zone is well, you see all the items here that are checked. Is it possible to have the chronometer? Thank you. So in this zone, and so any premises with swine in this will be submitted to increase biosecurity and also movement control. So the basic principle of a zone is to ensure that everything that moves in link with the disease. So in this case, the African swine fever will have to be moved under control, under a permit, under certain conditions, and maybe we can prohibit certain movements. There'll be a surveillance also in this zone, so as we saw, that can take different forms, and also there's going to be a reporting, a more quicker reporting of sick or dead pigs in this zone in regard compared to an external zone, because the risk is higher. So if there's an incident of disease and mortality, this is more at risk at this zone than if we move further away from the infected zone. So the PCZ here, you look at it here, so it's an infected zone surrounded with a radius of about like a circle. So a circle of a radius of a minimum of 3 kilometers. So depending on certain factors, we can go beyond 3 kilometers, but there's always a minimum of 3 kilometers, and this zone is infected zone. And so directly around the infected zone and around this, we have there's the circle, which is a restricted zone, which is a minimum of 10 kilometers from any infected premises. And so when we say that we're in a PCZ, we're within these zones, so the infected zone and within the restricted zone. And so if you're in one or the other, you're still in a primary control zone. So everything which is white around the yellow circle, so is the free zone where there's no disease. And here it's a look back at the ASF exercise in Quebec in October. So if to your left here, you really have the graphic with the different circles, but it's especially to the right where what we see in reality. So this is a irregular tracing, and so the purple is external limit of your restricted zone. Why are there not nice circles? Because we have to describe this. We have to say exactly follow the tracing, and to do this we follow roads or limits, boundaries, geographical of the environment, and so we have to describe it this way. So you can see here from this why it's a minimum of 3 kilometers, because it varies. The zone is never based on to exclude that'd be nice to exclude a certain establishment because they don't have a permit, but it's not done in this way. It's a minimum of 3 kilometers and 10 kilometers. Then we just try to use the roads in order to describe it. We already saw that what happens when we have an outbreak of ASF. When we have an affected zone, the markets will close. So even the countries that accept or recognize our zoning, at the beginning, there's going to be a closure of the border. They're not going to say, okay, we accept your zoning right away and send us pork products from Quebec or from Canada. They'll say, no, everything is closed. And then we have to show that what we showed on the paper, that we're able to contain it. That means that we're able to show that our zones allow to contain the disease in a specific place. And so then we will need some time to do surveillance in order to show that I didn't just have one case or I just had one case, or at least the cases are very close together and I don't have to spread my zone to a wider geographical area. So what we have to take into consideration regarding exports, yes, so there's a closure of the markets, as I said. Once the markets reopen, okay, let's say after a certain time we do our work, we show the other countries like the U.S., okay, we did our zones and so there's no other cases elsewhere. We know we're under surveillance, everything's under control. And then the United States will say, okay, but well, we hope so. So everything which is in the primary control zone will not be exportable. Everything that's there, and you have the list of what this refers. So everything that we're called designated animals. So regarding ASF, we animals, pork from animals originating or that have indirect contact with pork. So in terms of exports, you have the animals and the meat that comes from inside the PCZ, and so this is not exportable. Pork or byproducts processed in the PCZ, and so if you have pork that comes from the free zone but are slaughtered and are transformed in the PCZ, would not be exportable. And then the live pork or byproducts that are transited through the PCZ. So that means I'm in a free zone of disease. Let's say I have a truck and I go through the PCZ, even though it's a small portion. I go in the PCZ and I come back on the other side. Even though I didn't stop in the zone, but I transited, I will have an impact on the exports of these products. They shouldn't be exportable. There's exceptions. Certain products that can be, and it depends on the countries also, but certain countries will accept certain products that we're able to show that they went through thermal products in order to eradicate the ASF. But generally speaking, these are the guidelines. Just to give you an example, in the exercise that we did, we had two main highways, and so if you didn't want a limit of the exports, you had to go elsewhere in order to not suffer the consequence linked of the absence of exports because of transiting in a PCZ. And so the PCZ is declared when we have a confirmed case. Each time we have an infected zone, we have a PCZ that will be associated. This is for domestic. For wild pigs, it's a bit the same thing, but like opposite to other like avian flu, it's not going to be contained in the same way. The detection with wild birds, it won't have consequences regarding surveillance and restrictions for domestic birds, but it's specific for African swine fever. So if I discover that I have ASF in wild pigs and it's very close to a farm, then I'm going to apply a surveillance and restriction. I will have a PCZ for all domestic products. What is the relationship with the permits with zoning? Well, when I have a zone, I know that I have restrictions, and so in order to allow certain essential movements for the well-being of the animal, and so I have to do this with a permit. And the goal with the permit is to give a secure movement. And so how do I do this? Well, I can require certain things before issuing my permit to ensure that the movement is in compliance with the maximum of possible safety for a movement. And the permits is what also our commercial partners expect. Those who accept our zoning, they know that if you have a zone, there's certain specific activities in that zone, like controlled displacement with permits. And so the issuer of the requester of a permit and license can, and the issuers of the inspectors under the Health of Animals Act and regulations. So a permit is a legal document that must be accompany the movement, and this movement, I can authorize movements under condition. I can have a movement that is permitted but associated to cleaning and disinfection of the vehicle at the beginning and at the exit. I can have conditions like having tests, for example. Those who are more at risk are live pigs, and so they have to be tested. For example, 48 hours after they leave, there can be a veterinarian examination and then I have the biosecurity also measures at the beginning, at the end, and so all these cases have to be complied with before the issuing of the permit, and so we have to request, we have to meet the conditions, and then the request can be prohibited depending on the timing during the outbreak. Of course, at the beginning I will restrict things because we don't know the scope of what we're talking about. And this can depend also of the products that are more at risk. It depends where I am also. There might be a higher risk depending on where I'm at, where I begin also of the zone. And so this will tell us what is prohibited. Well, we establish standards, and this is always ongoing, and so we're very advanced here to say what we want, what requirement do we want regarding a movement, and this varies with time also. Those who went through avian flu, we readjust our target with time. This is more permissive, not or too restricted. Regarding the permits, there are different permits depending on the risk. So if the risk is low, well, a general permit, anybody can go online and print it out, and they take it with them during their displacement. So this is not a permit from the agency. We gave you this authorization to print out your own permit, but this requires the person accepts to comply with certain requirements, and this allows us to have a traceability aspect of this permit. And when we have a specific permit, then we have a higher permit risk. Associated with the movement. For example, living pigs. And so here you're going to have specific conditions to comply with. So if you want to move living pigs, you have to do it as quickly as possible, because we send a team for sampling, possibly an inspection to be done on site, and then you send us the biosecurity protocol. So this can be very exhaustive, what we're asking for this type of movement. Of course, it's the worst is at the beginning of the outbreak, because you don't know that you have to ask for a permit, and so at this time you have to prioritize. We have to prioritize, and you'll have to be ready to say, okay, I know these are the permits, and how do I go about to getting a permit? And also the permit can be unique, but also multi-use specific permits. So those who are service providers they can use it regularly in their protocols that they have. We know that they will comply with the requirements. We know their protocols, and this can be valid for many times, for many. And so everything is according to the ASF. It's important. What's important to know is when we control movements in a PCZ, everything that goes into, so you can have a pig in a free zone and who wants to enter the concerned zone by a permit, and so everything that enters, everything that comes out, everything that transits, and everything that goes through a PCZ. You need a transit. And the permits will be issued once we have evaluated the file and fill out all the conditions. And so, of course, there's a delay, and we ask at least 7 days before issuing a permit because, again, you don't know you're going to have an outbreak. And this slide is important because it gives you examples. And just to say, we're still finalizing things. And so what I'm giving you is ideas of size. For example, for living pigs, I would say that it's what's for almost for sure at least the first 15 days, no movement of a live pig will be possible. So like in, out, through, whatever transit, the living pigs cannot transit in such a zone. If you look at the first two lines, you have the pigs that are moved from one place to another, but your second line is those that go directly to the slaughterhouse. In both cases, the first column, well, the second column, it indicates that the permit will not be issued in the early stages of the outbreak, as I said, a minimum of 15 days. And the last column, can the animal move out of the PCZ? Again, the first two lines will not be able to. And so it's just to visualize how so there's no animals that go inside and transit. Those who are at the different stages of production, and those also destined to a slaughterhouse. The third line is really humane culling, and so a reduction of population. Of course, we're going to permit this from the beginning. It could be permitted, but there will be certain requirements linked to this, and so the culling will probably not be available at the first stages of. And if you look at the last column for the third line, yes, it's possible, but we'll tell you where to go. You won't be able to say, okay, I'm going to go any other place for culling. We're going to tell you where it's permitted, and the three categories requires to have tests on the animals. The authorization will remain in a PCZ because they're not revoked, and so when the PCZ is in place, I'm going to require permits and to meet conditions. The PCZ will be lifted following certain criteria, and this is announced. If we come back here to the exercise, to the right you have the schematic with the farms, and we had about 100 farms in this zone, so divided by the type of production, so you can see, give you a visual of the movement, what is not allowed in the first 15 days, and also once this is allowed, the transit, like for example the living pigs, you can see this represents over 30 days. For this zone, it represents about 400 permits that were requested. Not specific always, but the goal here is to use your imagination to say, okay, what is possible? What can be? So how do we start the machine? We want to issue permits, but at the same time, it's limited within for capacities. So we need the support of the industry, everybody's collaboration, even with your pig production, and to how transit can work. And in a perfect world, and I'm not giving solutions, but for sure, in the avian flu, we had some. A lot of the products could not be the manure. We could not move it around, but at the same, and so there's a risk of overlapping, and so it would be. So you can think about this, but the same thing regarding the need for warehousing feed. You don't need the delivery of feed every week. Maybe you can use more your warehouse in order to avoid all displacements that need a permit. This is feasible, and so you can think about this. So that's pretty much for me. Wraps it up for permits. Thank you, Caroline. Any quick questions for Caroline on the zones? Yes, Eva. Yes, thank you, Caroline. 3 questions, very practical. The first one, you said we're going to issue permits. The permits that are restrictive, apart from those online, you delegate that to certain people? Well, it's not impossible to delegate. to designate somebody, but we have to designate it according to the Health Act for animals. But the first thing would be the agency. Then for people like, this is my first training I was told that when there's a primary zone like this, it belongs to the industry to deal with the control and transportation. You won't have the personnel to do this. You're going to ask the plan, and if the plan is applied, is approved, you apply it. But regarding the restrictions, will you inform the people from the industry who deal with having the boundary recognized of the zone? Because when you emit the permit, the restricted permits, what proves us that the producer will follow that? So the people from the control have to know, is there communication with them? Yes, of course there's communication. If I give you the example that you need a permit in order to transit a zone, I would really like to say that we're on each corner, street corner, but we're not there. But yes, there's a part there that we don't have a control, so they can say, yeah, I'm going to do it, everything according to the written protocol, and won't be done. And so that can create a problem. Yes, I understand that we go according to the success percentage. My last question, very quickly, everything that you apply for the control zone, are we all in? We remain in agricultural zoning. I have a producer, milk producer. When we have a control zone like this, do I have to impose it to the milk transport or feed transport? No, for example, unless they go where there are pigs, and so that's why I omitted this part. But that's an excellent question. When the minister will delegate to the president of the CFIA and to designate a PCZ and with a list of things for African swine fever is related to live pigs, what they produce, subproducts, meat, etc., and everything that can be in contact with these species. And so if I will give you an example, the same thing for avian flu, in that we designated everything was avian. So those who, like a truck who went to deliver exclusively on a pig farm didn't. And so he can be geographically in the zone. There was no problem, except that the last day that he would take his permit. Yes, exactly. This is all the time that we have. Thank you.